When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs.
In all of science, we're looking for a balance between data and theory. You don't have to delude yourself with Iron Age fairy tales.
The same spiritual fulfillment that people find in religion can be found in science by coming to know, if you will, the mind of God.
The real world, as it actually is not evil. It's remarkable. And the way to understand the physical world is to use science.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold.
Teach a man to reason and think for a lifetime. Think for a lifetime.
Welcome everybody, welcome to the 4th edition of Freethought Friday. My name is Robert Coyle and my usual co-host
is Ciarán O'Brien. Hi everybody.
And this week we have a very special guest with us. We have Ashling from Atheist Ireland.
How you doing? Thank you for asking me to come along this evening.
Thank you very much, Ashling. Thanks for coming along.
So, do you want to actually introduce yourself and maybe just tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Okay,
and,
so
how you're involved in Atheist Ireland.
Yep, I'm Ashling O'Brien. I'm the chairperson of the Dublin Regional Branch of Atheist Ireland. So it's quite new that we have a Dublin branch. There was one, then there wasn't one, and now there is one again, which is good. So what I'm interested in is actually organising social stuff that we do. So atheists in the pub and keeping the branches going, that sort of thing.
Excellent.
So.
Excellent.
Smiley side of despairing disbelief.
Yes, you've got to keep smiling with a pint in your hand, preferably.
Absolutely. Excellent. That's fantastic. I've been to obviously a few of the lunches, the brunches. I've met you there before, and they're fantastic. It's a great idea.
They are getting so popular as well. We're up in the mid-20s in numbers there now. So
that's fantastic. And I have seen, although I haven't attended some of the ones outside of Dublin, but first of all, not only are there ones outside of Dublin, but quite a large number of them.
They are growing.
Yeah.
They are growing. There's definite interest. Some are a bit slower to take off. And there was a theory going around that, the more rural areas possibly didn't quite do brunch.
Right.
So so they're looking at other options, slightly more, dare I say,
maybe
rural options to brunch.
Like Linner, the meal between lunch and dinner.
Linner. Yeah.
They may be getting up earlier. That might be.
No, we regularly have maybe 7 or 8 brunches going on around the country every month now. So it's a community.
And what counties are the brunches normally in?
There are brunches, regular brunches now in Meath, Cork, Waterford, Roscommon, Galway. I'm sure I'm going to miss some. Dublin, of course, and there's definitely more.
Excellent, that's great. And so people can get more information.
They'll get it on Facebook. Yeah,
perfect.
It's all on the Facebook group.
The Atheist Ireland Facebook group.
Just go on there.
Excellent.
Find it there.
Yeah. Well, Ashling, we asked you to join us today because Robert and I were discussing what our next topic should be. And given that it has been quite topical and continues to be topical, we wanted to discuss abortion and all of the issues that surround that. But given that neither Robert nor I were, first of all, women, and myself and I'm in a relationship with another man, so that just almost completely counts me out.
I do know a few women.
You're married to one.
Yes.
Play the I have a wife card here.
Tell of them.
We thought we should definitely get a token female, if not
Robert
someone
thought,
really
I know
good.
one of them. Yes. Okay.
I've heard of them.
So we were wondering if you would come on and talk to us about, in particular, we know we'll probably be talking mostly about a secular viewpoint on abortion, both I suppose a pro side or language is a problem here.
Yes.
So maybe you can help educate us on this. But basically, there are certainly two sides of the argument, even within a secular construct, as opposed to, of course, then there's religious ones. So maybe do you want to have a chat with us about what those are, both maybe the two secular sides and the religious one? Or
well, I suppose to start with the religious one, because I think maybe to get that one off the table early on, I think we're all pretty clear on what the religious arguments around abortion are. I mean, it is what legislation in Ireland has been based on. So, you know, you get into discussions, most pro-life groups tend to come from a religious background. And I suppose their argument will always be God, because God.
Yeah.
So, you know, why is it not okay to have an abortion? God.
Yeah.
Because God. So I suppose as an atheist, there's not a huge amount you can actually do with that argument, because you've got to dismantle the God argument first.
Yes.
So, you know, I don't find a huge amount of point, to be honest, in engaging with people who hold a very, very religious pro-life. And when I use the word pro-life, the pro-choice tends to say anti-choice.
Right.
Yes.
I still use pro-life because it's what they've chosen to call themselves. And for me, if someone is identifying as pro-life, there are certain things that have to follow suit with that. So they have to stand firm on other issues as well. And they tend to, in fairness, I mean, they also tend to be anti-euthanasia, anti-assisted suicide, and various other issues as well. So
this would come. So would it be accurate to say then that most religious viewpoint comes from the base fundamental belief that only God has the power to give or take life?
But God gives life, God can take it away, and
so
it's not for man to be able to determine when that happens. And it's interesting because you know, 70% of pregnancies are naturally, and you know, I've gotten into discussions with religious people on this, and they have used that's God, that's natural.
Handy.
God can do that.
Handy.
Yeah. So, you know, and I was like, well, that's not very nice of God. Can God not, you know, why is God taking that out on the, you know, this is what
that's
they
a special
call
secret that the men who are priests get to
know, you know.
In their special treehouse. They have a special treehouse in the Garden of the Vatican, and they all go up.
Yeah.
And they all get told secrets as to
but
why
when God does it, it's not a problem.
Yeah, he's not being an unmitigated bastard.
No.
Because I think it's an interesting. I know maybe we'll go into how these these questions are brought up in the media and amongst people. But one of the things, as almost entirely an outside observer of this whole process, one of the things that has always bothered me, and it gets me to click off the radio the second the abortion question comes up, is because there's so much guff, I suppose, out there, and which I personally think is coming a lot, in many cases, from the religious side in relation to this, but also is coming from what maybe people themselves would consider secular, but is still, I would argue, faith-based positions, that they're not evidence-based positions. They're not positions that necessarily they've reasoned out or thought about. And as a result, I find that the whole space is cluttered with, I don't want to say misinformation or disinformation. I think it's misunderstandings in most cases, but I find it hard for me to filter through and try to understand what's really going on here and what are the questions.
Well, I suppose the short answer is there's a huge amount of deliberate misinformation and it is being pushed through, and you know, you do have to do your research to get through. I mean,
can you give us, because I mean, okay, so deliberate misinformation.
Yeah, well, the most obvious one is the posters that most of the pro-life groups use, that we see, and we have all seen them, and they claim that they are abortions, and they're actually late-term miscarriages.
Yes.
So that's a deliberate misinformation that's being put forward. I mean, there are other examples as well, but that's the one that most people would immediately
So just to reiterate, all of those horrific images that you see in those posters, they're not the result of abortions.
No.
They are a natural process culminating
miscarriage.
in a late-term miscarriage.
Yeah.
A completely unfortunate but natural process.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because, of course, that those kind of things, because they have an emotive reaction associated with them, could very much sway people. And I think this is precisely where, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with both of you. I think this is precisely where Freethought can come to bear, irrespective of maybe where you might land on this. That to be able to use the processes of free thought, of critical thinking, of looking for evidence for your position and indeed evidence against the position, and trying to weigh it up. That's how we try to stop this kind of misinformation. But unfortunately, most of us don't tend to think like that.
I do agree with you, and I would have agreed with you more strongly until I actually started to do a little more research to prepare for this. And because I didn't want to focus too much on the religious argument, I wanted to have a look at pro-life people who are secular,
right,
and atheist and humanist, and try and understand where they're coming from. But to me, that's more interesting. You know, if you take God did it out of the equation, then there has to be some evidence-based, I would have thought, some evidence-based argument there. So I contacted a person I know who is an atheist and is pro-life, and I asked them to explain to me. And this person sent me quite a few links to Facebook pages and blogs. And so I kind of spent most of the weekend kind of just reading over. Now, I wouldn't say I got into any huge depth. There's probably years and years and years and years of blogs there. But I just tried to distill what the argument was. Because there has to be a pretty good argument if you've taken... I would have thought a pretty solid argument. So I don't know if we can just have maybe a little look at some of
please
do. I mean, we can put the links up, but there's you know, I suppose the first one that you'd look at is the Facebook page of Pro-Life Secular Facebook page, and this Pro-Life Humanist page. So the first one I looked at was the Pro-Life Secular page, and what struck me immediately was it was unlike any other secular Facebook page I had ever been on.
Right.
In that there was an article that looked at changing opinions. That it's cited research, and it said opinions around legalization of marijuana. It was a research carried out in America. Opinions around legalization of marijuana have remained static. Opinions around have moved towards legalizing, and the same support for marriage equality. People have moved towards supporting marriage equality, but the opinion of abortion has remained static. And it was just an interesting little article, and it was presented. But where you get really interesting is when you start reading the comments. And there was a level of homophobia on those comments that you would not expect.
Really?
On a secular page.
Homophobia.
Because they were talking about, someone made the comment, well, you know, a gay being a lifestyle choice. And they were like, well, you know, marijuana is a lifestyle choice, being gay is a lifestyle choice, but abortion is murder.
Right.
And then someone made the comment,
well, that's it for this week, folks. Abortion is a lifestyle choice, so is being homosexual, but abortion is murder, unfortunately. So, we're done.
But someone else had come back with a comment and gone, oh, well, you know, you can't say that the gays don't do any harm. You know, because they're spreading HIV and AIDS.
Sneaky
you
gays.
Would never get this on
sneaky, shifty gays.
But this is
the agenda, right? This is the agenda we keep hearing so much about.
I'm just so busy recently that I keep missing the agenda meeting every time.
I'm fascinated by this. So this group. So what's that Facebook group again?
It's Pro-Life Secular.
Pro-Life Secular. So is that an Irish group or an English group or an American group?
I got the impression it was an American group. I think I've traced it to pretty much the one woman who also is the Pro-Life Humanist group, and she did a debate with Matt Delahunty. Her name is Christine, and I'm going to go with my best Dublin pronunciation of Kruzelnicki. Okay. And there is a very good debate up on YouTube between her and Matt Delahunty, and it's entitled "Secularists should not support the right to abortion." There we go. So yeah. So there seems to be a few different. There's another one. The what's it called? The Bell Tower blog. I found that one. She seems to be involved in that as well. There was some links from that one actually. Interestingly, if people want to have a look, from the Bell Tower blog, I think it was. And it was
and we'll put all these links up.
We'll put all these links up, lads. There was a link to a quiz you could take. To see how aware you were around sexual health. But on the quiz, it was obviously aimed at younger women. It was the graphics were pink and you know. And on the quiz, it was a question for each week of a pregnancy, and there was a picture of the development of the fetus at each stage, and the questions were, you know, and some of the answers to the questions were abstinence, you know, which you wouldn't expect from secularists.
Oh wow! Well, so Can I? Okay, so
Yeah.
you see, when I hear abstinence, a big red
Yeah.
buzzer goes off my
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
Because abstinence can only come from faith-based
Yes.
opinions.
And
Abstinence does not
that
come
was a
from
big
any
flashing-
evidence.
yeah.
That's a real warning sign.
Yes.
So in that case, then, might this actually be the front for a religious group pertaining to be a secular pro-life group?
I think there's probably, but it was interesting because
Like
I
a
thought
fifth
that
column type of thing?
I thought maybe, but they do go out of their way to distance the pro-life argument from religion. And interestingly,
But
what
they still go on about homophobia and
they,
stuff like that.
in the comment section on the Facebook
Yeah.
page, it wasn't the group who were commenting; it was
Yeah.
the people who had liked the page,
Right.
Which I thought was interesting if they were secular.
Well, isn't this what we see all? Like what you can find is Ken Ham has a lucid enough looking Facebook profile.
Yes.
No, not really,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
But, it's competent.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like it's put together by somebody who understands computers and
Yes,
science
and isn't
and the
still
Big Bang.
using a rock. That's another rock.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not made of dinosaur bones. So yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you know, I mean, what listening to now how you've described some of this, and still in shock about how dangerous I guess I must be to society. Is it possible, because I think we shouldn't definitely confuse secular with free thought or rational,
No.
in that one could be secular. You could loosely interpret secular as non-religious.
You can be religious and secular.
But you could,
Yes.
But I mean,
Yeah.
but I would argue you could still have a faith-based position, or maybe I should say a non-evidence-based position on this question,
Yes.
and still not have as a derivative of some religious.
Yes.
What might
dogma.
be very useful for people, because this might be their first time listening to this, is actually if we define secular, humanist, and stuff like that. Just very a very
Sure.
quick definition.
Just go.
Right. That's thanks.
I'll take a stab at it.
But I can go with the atheist one.
Grand.
That's
I'll take secular as far as I know. So secular believes in just the separation of church and state. That there is freedom of religion, there is freedom of belief. You can be a fully signed up Bible thumping, rosary strangling Catholic and stuff, but actually still believe that the laws of the land should be set by man, and then decide to adhere to the laws of God written in your book for your own personal thing, but feel that those laws should not be imposed on anybody else. Well, do we agree that that's
I would go
accurate?
with that.
I think that's
I
fine.
would-
I think that's perfect. And
Right.
there is the Secular Coalition of America, I think, which is an alliance between atheist humanists and other secular
Okay.
groups, and a number of religious
groups.
who support,
Okay.
for example,
Yes.
that concept.
I think the other point then with secularism, there comes a freedom of religion as well, that everyone can practice their own beliefs
Absolutely.
unhindered,
That's
as long as they're
protected
not
by the law of the land.
yes, and
Exactly.
they're not in any way harming anyone else by
Imposed.
those
Exactly.
beliefs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas I think my definition of humanism is going to be a little bit flaky here, but
That is humanism.
well,
right?
yeah, I suppose one could argue that is
Leave
humanism.
the humanists alone. They always get picked on.
I
They're
love-
an easy target, really.
I love me my humanists. Humanism, I suppose, tends to be very rational, and actually, I should say secular humanism, which is the term that tends to be used, which I understand is because humanism, there are variants of Christian humanism and maybe even Buddhist humanism. So I think in this case, when using the word secular humanism as a phrase together, tends to be humanists who are likely to be atheists anyway, but I don't want to say it's atheism plus, but it's certainly a little bit more than just we have settled on this question and that's it. But we've gone a little bit further by creating a positive, life-affirming philosophy of life and of our interaction with our fellow man and woman, and as a result, I think it's precisely why humanists tend to be our celebrants for secular and indeed almost atheistic ceremonies of life, like weddings, and I had a humanist celebrant at our wedding. So, do you want to give us just the atheist definition, or sorry, do you want to add to that? By the way, do you guys agree with that?
No, I'd be
works
happy
for
with
me.
that. I suppose my atheist definition is very, very simply: there just isn't enough evidence to say that there is that gods exist. If enough evidence was presented, I'm willing to change my mind. But the evidence hasn't been presented.
And I think we come back to this. I think we repeat this in every single podcast. most atheists, when they say they don't believe in God, what they mean is the God of the Bible. There is you could decide that, like, you know, there's a spirit of goodness or oneness or whatever, that it permeates the universe.
Like a pantheism type.
Fine, grand. Not concerned about that. No one's blowing shit up because of belief in that. Okay, it's specifically the belief in the God of Abraham and intercession and miracles and my word and all the nasty, horrible stuff that goes with that.
But any of the gods.
That's right.
Particularly those ones.
Thor worship bastards.
Don't get me started on Thor.
So having understood that secular, as simply on its own, may or may not necessarily be devoid of faith-based, faith.
But you would expect a level of rationalism,
most certainly,
that you wouldn't necessarily get if it was just solely faith-based.
Yes, most certainly.
So I suppose to go back, Christine, in the debate with Matt Delahunty, outlined where she was coming from as a secularist, and really for me, I mean, there was a few different points that I picked up on, but her whole argument was it's human. And that was really, for me, what it boiled down to. There was a couple of other things they brought in, you know, that abortion is a race issue, particularly in America, because more black women have abortions than white women. So they do try and add other little bits and pieces in. I mean, I think we can agree that abortion is a socioeconomic issue.
Absolutely.
You know, because women who can't afford to have children.
That's what I say. The evidence leads you to the conclusion that it is a socioeconomic. You can decide to ignore that evidence and say race and whatever. But if you look at the actual evidence, it would lead you to believe that it's strongly correlated with socioeconomic.
I mean, that's definitely something that we can pick apart a little bit more anyway.
But can I ask a question later? So they say it's all, and when I say they, and I know you're speaking
from
exactly. So we as we do with everything, if we get any of this wrong, please contact us. We'll be happy to kind of restate it and stuff like that.
I mean, if it means you have a secularist pro-life to refute every single thing I've said,
we'll have another. We can have a debate. We have we've no stake in what is the outcome and stuff. So the argument that Christine, sorry, is that her name?
It's Christine. I'm going to go with Krzyzelnicki.
Krzyzelnicki. Okay,
that's
so
what
Christine
we go with.
Krzyzelnicki, as we think her name is pronounced. Yeah. So her argument is that it is human. So therefore,
so
life is human life, and therefore, irrespective of what stage. Are they talking about the moment of fertilization?
The moment of fertilization. And the reason she's saying that the zygote at the moment of fertilization is alive, and she uses the biogenesis argument to prove that it's alive, that life always comes from life. That keeping with the species, that species breed.
Okay, right. Yeah.
So life must always come from life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we can. Yeah. So
that's right. Rocks can't have babies.
Have babies. Yes. That's basically
yes.
That it's human. It has human parents. So it is human.
Because okay, Grant.
Yeah.
Sorry
so
interrupting. Yeah.
It has DNA, which determines gender and traits and code for development.
Okay. So does the virus.
And that it's a whole. Unlike a whole thing, so unlike sperm or the ovum or other human cells, it is a thing.
Okay, I can understand that. I mean, that requires it's a degree of.
Yeah, it is.
I've got to make a lot of leaps.
Yes.
Because I think I've actually mentioned this. I think it was with yourself, Karen. I mentioned this, and. I may as well say, kind of what my opinion of it is at this point anyway. So I imagine, a woman who is about to give birth, so a woman who is 1 day off her due date, okay, 9 months pregnant minus 1 day.
Or even 9 months pregnant minus 1 second.
Oh, 1 second. And she says, I don't want this, I want to have an abortion. I think everyone would say, well, that's premeditated murder. No, you can't have that. I think a woman 2 or 3 days after she discovers that her period's a bit late, that's not the same thing. So somewhere in between that moment and the due date, I think is where the line suddenly crystallizes. I mean, I would have an opinion where that is, and then you get into kind of rights issues and stuff, and the kind of access, and I think that's. I'm hoping we kind of get into all that later.
Yes, definitely.
But this group here says no, there is no continuum. It's on off.
It's on off to the point where they would not approve of contraception that blocks implantation. So some forms of contraception mean that. Well, again, this group, this was her in a debate, and I'm just trying to draw out. But she seems to be quite central to this group. Again, I can be proven wrong.
That's religious based. That has to be religious based. I fail to see.
Yeah.
That's.
Well,
okay, I disagree strenuously with that stuff.
Yeah, well, and I have to say, Matt Delahanty did kind of, he probed and he got that out of her. That
because that is defining human beings, and that is saying that actually one of the primary uses of human beings is merely to procreate, and that procreation takes precedence over what happens to be happening to the organism at that time, environmentally, physically, psychologically, any other way. Once you're pregnant, I'm sorry, you are now the chauffeur of this much more valuable asset.
And your rights no longer apply as a human being.
Yeah.
Your rights are superseded.
So that's not evidence based for a start.
Well, interesting enough, Matt kind of asked her about, so if it's a human, then you would say abortion is murder, and she said yes. He said, so what should happen to a woman who has an abortion? She said, well, it depends what the laws are in that particular state for murder. Is that if you're unlucky enough to have an abortion, if it's illegal, in a state that has the death penalty. And she said, I don't support the death penalty because, of course, she's pro-life. But she said, yes, if that's the punishment for murder, then yes.
Which, of course, is always the problem with the death penalty.
And for the doctors who assisted.
Murder is
and
so
nurses.
wrong that we'll murder you for doing it. And
well, but even if it's a jail sentence, she said, yes, in keeping with the crime of murder. It's what the courts see fit.
Yeah. Right. So
I'm actually speechless.
And that's one because I have discussed at the Atheist Ireland do an information table once a month outside the GPO the first Saturday of the month, and I have to do that plug. That was smooth.
Do that again. When is the next one?
So it's 12 to 2 the first Saturday of the month outside the GPO. Smooth.
Nice,
but I have talked to pro-life people at the table, and I have used that one. You're telling me about what do you think the punishment should be for the woman, and that's usually stopped them. They've usually gone, no. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be sending them to prison. But she has gone one step further because she'd send them to the. But she has to because she hasn't got God in her argument. She has to follow the rational argument to the absolute bitter end. And
so her crime, her response to this is murder is to kill somebody,
or imprison someone for life, and the doctor and the nurses who assisted because they were assisting with murder. They were accessories to murder.
Yeah. And so, can I ask then? So, in relation to the human argument, I think we're calling this from where it's considered human from the on-off.
What they call a pre-born human. Because there's the way she described it as well, a 5-year-old child is obviously very different to an 80-year-old woman. Yeah. In size and in look and in body. So a pre-born human is very different to a 5-year-old child. It's just
but same rights,
rights across
absolutely
the board.
No equivocation on this. So moment of fertilization through to right
to
before
moment
your heart
of
stops,
natural
death. All of the same rights apply.
All of the same rights.
No questions asked.
Yeah, that's what I took from. I mean, someone can tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I. And if that is where they're coming from, you can see how this causes huge ethical issues for them. Even more so than God did it. It's a soul, and you'd be going against the word of God.
I'll be honest. I have more respect. But this is my first time hearing this argument. Yeah. I can understand a religious person having only God has the power to give life and take away life, and following that through, and then overlaying that with God's forgiveness. So therefore. The woman who has the abortion therefore can be forgiven.
Hate the sin, love the sinner, and certain things that follow with that.
This Christine, it doesn't make any sense. I find
it quite disturbing. I have to be honest. As I kind of researched a little bit more.
Can we call it fucking stupid? Can we call it that?
I found it
That's a fucking stupid argument.
There was a woman who stood up towards the end of the debate, and she shared her story, and she had gotten pregnant. She was using birth control. It hadn't worked, as can happen, and she'd gotten pregnant and was taking panic attacks, and she said she had a partial breakdown, and she miscarried, and the doctor told her that it was her fault she miscarried because she'd put her body under so much stress. And she asked Christine, was that manslaughter? And Christine wasn't turning around to her and saying, no, it wasn't.
Jesus.
That's
But what you have in Mexico at the moment is you actually have Mexico's. You think our abortion laws are bad here? In Mexico, there are women who are having miscarriages and out of fear because they go to their doctor and the doctors are calling the police to investigate whether or not it was a miscarriage or an abortion. And you have women who've had miscarriages in Mexico who are going to jail and serving time for having a miscarriage because they can't tell for sure whether or not it was something the woman did. So this is brought to an extreme where women are serving time.
Christopher Hitchens talks about totalitarianism, and his opinion. I've just finished reading his biography, Hitch 22, and his opinion was that the core bit of totalitarianism is the non-reliable implementation of rules. You can never know whether you're on the side of I didn't break the rule or I did break the rule. So that strikes me. So a situation as you've just described to me in Mexico, that to me that's a big warning of that's something else that's going on.
Yeah.
There's something very deeply disturbing about that, because that's a rule, that's a law that you cannot possibly be confident of obeying and not breaking.
And women will die because they won't go to their doctor after having a miscarriage.
Wow.
So I mean, that is, I had no idea. I was in Mexico recently. I had no idea actually that it was worse than what it is in Ireland. Can I? So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to disrupt the flow.
No.
Okay.
Go for it.
So I have two questions.
We're going down the rabbit hole now.
Absolutely, and it's getting weirder and darker and twistier.
This is the light bit of the
So I have two questions that maybe you might be able to help me with. First of all, I'm going to try and play devil's advocate, not necessarily because I really want to, but because I need to understand more, and I don't. So can you give me? I presume there is a counter argument to the "it's human life on off." Can you give me what that general counter argument would be?
Okay, so really, it's. You know, where do you draw the line? Arbitrarily in England, I think at the moment it's 24 weeks. Yeah. That's just a number that has been picked out and applied. And I suppose one of the issues around it is because as a pregnancy comes towards the end, people get more and more and more uncomfortable with the idea of abortion.
Absolutely.
Because it's more and more and more like the human life that it has the potential to be. So. And I suppose one of the last bridges for me to have crossed in becoming pro-choice was getting my head around late-term abortions.
Yeah.
So we have chosen, various countries, various jurisdictions have chosen different points, 12 weeks, 24 weeks, and they've just chosen it.
Right.
There doesn't seem to be any real medical reason why.
Well, that's interesting.
You know,
I had always thought it was that once they considered it was at least possible that the fetus could survive outside of the womb, then they definitely cut it off.
At 24 weeks, well, that's the thing, you know, as medical science improves,
eventually
you bring on the need to the woman at all.
I'm really glad we've come to this, because this has been my issue specifically with that, which is at some point, and I think we can think somewhere certainly within the next century, if not within the next 2 to 3 decades, we will have artificial wombs. We will be able to grow a human being from we can get a sperm, an egg with one sperm, one egg, combine them in a petri dish, and basically put them and grow a human. So I think if you get onto the roll, if the argument comes from the potential for life, that's not a long-term solution.
I don't think that's a long-term
solution. Because I think
solution.
science will always overcome. Medicine is getting better and better and better with that.
So I think this is where you have to kind of kick in with the pro-choice, and that you basically you trust the woman to make the decision. Now, when it came to late-term abortions, I really did it was the last bit that I struggled with. There's a fantastic documentary called After Tiller.
Right.
And if you haven't had a chance to see it, Dr. Tiller was an abortion doctor in the States who was assassinated. They went into his church and shot him. Yeah. And it was the work that his colleagues were continuing. And part of the documentary is it follows and it talks to women who are going to the clinic for a late-term abortion. Mm-hmm. And
a late-term abortion would be what?
As late as... Usually it's because of fetal abnormalities. But there can be other reasons. Late term, maybe into 7 months even, and that's a very late term abortion.
So 28, 30 weeks this type of
So
thing.
it's the patient and the doctor and the reason the woman, and look, what came across in that documentary, it was heartbreaking. None of those women walked in and said, yeah, I just didn't get round to it.
Yeah.
That was the thing. There was something there that drove that woman in a desperate state to be there.
Yeah.
She just didn't say, I was a bit busy. And I think as uncomfortable as it makes us, we need to step back and say, we don't really understand why any woman presents herself at any stage of a pregnancy for an abortion. So, it was, again, no one is like, woohoo, abortion party, let's go, but you've got to, and this is where you've got to pull back and say, I suppose my whole stance on the abortion issue is I'm pro-minding my own fecking business. And really, it's none of my business why any woman presents for an abortion. I trust that they understand their own situation, and their medical team are the ones who make that judgment.
Well, I think, and I think I alluded to this in my Facebook conversation with you last week as well. When we live in a society that essentially has quite a prurient, very uptight attitude towards sex education, the access to contraception, you're going to end up with abortion. Like, we have a system that makes abortions. Make no mistake of it. Thanks to Ciarán, who 2 podcasts ago gave me the concept of the purpose of a system is what it does. 3,500 women going to England every single year. That means we have a system that makes 3,500 abortions, 10 a day.
But
it's absolutely on track.
We're
it's a wonderful system.
We're actually in keeping with we are in keeping with the rest of Europe. They would be the average rate. So even despite the fact that, and I suppose maybe it's reflected in because women have to have the resource to travel. I think if we get to the point where we are repealing the Age Amendment and we are actually sitting down having adult conversations about abortion in this country, this has to be married with second to none sex education and free contraception.
Absolutely. I mean,
this goes without saying.
Here's the point. I mean, if you're a religious person and you don't agree with abortion, and you've actually got it, then the religious argument is contraception the same as abortion? And religious people say yes, it is. That the denial of the potential of the potential is the same as actually going out and actually kind of murdering someone. A secular approach, as Christine kind of said, she's against she's against
contraception that stops the fertilized egg from implanting.
That it's progress, but
I suppose the only difference is that the Catholics just want you to stop the egg and sperm meeting. As long as the egg and sperm don't meet, then But I suppose to go back to that then, I think what we're talking about then is very much a humanist point of view around abortion, a humanist perspective. And I think that's where most pro-choice people, where they get their where they are pro-choice from, it's because they care deeply about the woman.
So that's actually, this is very interesting because I suppose I'm a techie, an IT techie, but being technically minded, when I was looking at this, in the very limited way that I have, I was looking for my technical reason to either tell me to be pro-choice or not, and it's actually it's I think a far better argument that you've just presented here is the humanist argument. I mean, because I certainly would agree with the. Do you know what? Yeah. Even if I had an opinion, it doesn't matter. It's still nothing really to do with me. But yeah, I think that's interesting. If we just, instead of talking analytics or medical technicalities or whatever, or theological technicalities for that matter, that we actually go, well, look, can we not just trust that our women, with the right information, with the right medical care, with the right counselling, of course, as well, will be able to just make the right decision for them. And I would imagine, so you've told me, you've educated me that there are limits, there are term limits in most countries. So we're not talking about, as you said, people are coming in and just said, I didn't get round to it at 9 weeks minus 1 second or 1 day or whatever.
This isn't the I want an abortion because I want to fit into my bikini.
Or I'm going to the Christmas party. This is this does.
This just does not happen, and I think, and unfortunately, quite often happens, in particular in relation to religious side of these things. as I don't know if the secular one does, slippery slope arguments, which tend to be horrific anyway,
Yes.
is quite often still the one that's thrown at people. If we allow abortion at this point,
phrase,
then people will be
abortion on
aborting.
demand. There's the phrase that's commonly used, which means giving women the choice to,
they can have it when they want it.
But it's
after
something
36 months they can abort. It's like.
Abortion on demand is one, and you very often will hear Cor Sherlock and other people from Youth Defence and Precious Life and all the other American funded groups, and they will talk about you'll open the floodgates to abortion on demand, and then you'll hear people say things like, well, women will start using abortion as a form of contraception.
Not if
they've got free contraception that they can actually afford, and they're not having to make the choice of, do I put food on the table or do I buy my pill this month?
And again, I think this is where we go back to like the genesis of all of these. I think if you kind of go like even just exactly that argument that you've just laid out there, right? Which is that sex is actually something that is kind of sex is a questionable practice, and so there are negative consequences. Yeah, there are consequences. And you know what? If you're going to have sex, we should bloody well live with those consequences.
And the word is out there, and you'll hear it every now and then. Punishment.
Absolutely.
It's you get pregnant for having sex. Well, that's your punishment.
That's that.
And you just have to
you made
take
your
your
bed,
punishment, and there you go.
You got to get laid in it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know what? We could go back to the whole mother and babies homes and everything. I mean, this was how Irish society dealt with sex before marriage. The babies were
looked the other way.
Yeah, and the babies were killed. That was the babies were.
The purpose
they
of that
died from neglect.
Again, the purpose of that system was to
basically
as they
shame.
said, make that problem just
go away. Go away.
And so this, I said earlier on that I had two questions. This actually brings me to my second question. I'm interested in, again, I'm a former history student as well, and I like to look at how societies and people dealt with these things in the past. Quite often we forget. So I can't imagine, as you've described, for example, what's happening in Mexico today, I can't imagine that happened in the past. No, maybe it did, but I'm just curious to see what we did. I mean, obviously we wouldn't have access to the medical kind of the medical technology and knowledge that we have now. But was this an issue
in Ireland? Historically, women have always sought ways to end pregnancies.
Right,
they've always looked for ways to have abortion, and there are still certain herbs that they advise you don't take when you're pregnant because they can cause miscarriages. So there were midwives and there were herbalist type who women went to, and the amount of women who went to backstreet abortionists and died with accessing illegal abortion. I suppose from an Irish perspective, this is from the Irish Family Planning Association website that people can have a look at, and it does give the legal timeline. But interestingly, if we go right to the back, our current abortion laws come from 1861.
Yeah.
Right. And just, Offences Against the Person Act 1861 criminalises women who procure a miscarriage. The Act also makes the crime to assist a woman to procure a miscarriage. The punishment in both cases is life imprisonment. The Act also criminalises anyone...
So that is listing as nearly as a capital crime.
Yeah. So anyone who knowingly supplies the means to procure a miscarriage. So these were on the Irish statute books until 83.
Now, were they a handover from English law?
They would have been a handover from English law and just kind of made a bit Catholic then as things went along.
I read something somewhere recently, maybe last week I think it was, and they were talking about the Church's attitude towards abortion hardened considerably in and around the Reformation. That pre the Reformation, because infant mortality was such a really, really high, heavy thing, that abortion wasn't really considered as bad as it is considered today. Now, I don't know...
Was this probably because with the Reformation they were losing Catholics? There was competition maybe for the first time.
I've no idea.
So every sperm suddenly became a lot more sacred.
I think it might have been that. I think they also made allusion to the fact that the society was much more agrarian. Right. And so therefore life and death is as urban dwellers we're kind of separated from life and death realistically. I mean, you see people being born on TV, or if you're there and you see people dying, and there really isn't any other kind of thing. Whereas, like, if you're a farmer, if you're dealing with animals and stuff, you see life and death everywhere. You get the whole circle of life thing, and that's now again. I probably should have made a note of that, but I didn't. That seems to be the kind of the vibe I was kind of getting off with that, because of this kind of more rural agrarian.
Right, I hadn't come across that, so no, it's definitely something worth.
That's interesting. Yeah. So then, can you bring us up to? So we had these laws replaced in.
So the 1983, they had the referendum.
Right. And this is what is this created Article 8 or changed Article 8?
This put the Eighth Amendment into basically it says that the Eighth Amendment, that the right to the life of the unborn.
Right.
And the recognising the right to life of the woman, but the right to life of the unborn trumped it.
Right.
And that's basically what. And 83, if you were 18 in 83 and you voted, you're 49 now.
Yeah.
Right.
So no one under the age of 49 has voted on this issue in Ireland.
Yes.
Right. Which in and of itself, I have some serious issues in relation to our constitution, but I'm not going to go into that. But this is certainly one of these things that actually crops up. I think these things should be voted on or presented every generation at least. And
things
change so fast, and unfortunately our political system tends to.
Here's utopian actually. How about we just allow them, and people can exercise choice and not do it if they don't want to. I mean, I don't go crazy here.
I think is our constitution the place to have?
No,
a specific law.
That's so specific. Yeah. I mean, it's the same. It's slightly off, but the same. The blasphemy is our constitution the place to have such a specific. Yeah.
And unfortunately, this I'm sure there are legal scholars out there who would probably know this better than we would. But I often hear that this is one of the biggest criticisms of our constitution, that unfortunately it is not loose enough to be a kind of long-term constitution, but not rigid enough to be just a body of law. And it's straddling the fence between the two and does neither well and both badly kind of thing. So
and we've had a kind of a dinky political system that uses it as a kind of a popularity football.
Exactly, very much so. And I mean, like it's not quite the same thing, but I mean, even the question of same-sex marriage, which is going to be voted on, it's part of me is very delighted that we're finally getting around to this question. And the other part is like, I mean, I feel the same when you say in relation to this is just not my concern. I shouldn't be involved. I kind of feel the same. It's just like this is nobody else's concern. I shouldn't be turning around
and giving other people permission to marry.
It is just so that
they did take legal advice. I mean, it was quite grey whether or not they needed a referendum.
That's true, and without a doubt that the reason why it is being done is because, well, there's two reasons. One, again, I think political cover for those who in power who don't really want to be seen to be supporting it. But perhaps, in fairness, though, to those, unless complete clarification is given, which it would be in a referendum, the chance of getting this situation where it passes, there are marriages, then it's challenged successfully, and now you're in this bizarre situation.
Which is happening in the States quite a lot at the moment.
So while I don't like it, and I disagree with it, I prefer that clarity is provided. So, and I suppose it's easy for me to say that because I think it will pass. But I mean, this is the same thing. It's almost like this should never be voted on. It should never have been voted on anyway in the first place. But if we ever get to the point where it's presented as a potential,
we will have to have a referendum on it, because we cannot legislate. I mean, obviously the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act is a shambles.
Yes,
they have to realise they cannot legislate with the Eighth Amendment in place. So we need to get rid of it, and then we need to start having adult conversations about it. But that cannot happen while it's in place.
So do you think? So actually, let me ask you that. What do you think needs to be put in place in order for us to have the adult conversations?
Well, nothing in the Constitution. Nothing about abortion in the Constitution.
Sure.
So then you can start actually looking at legislation. I suppose my fear is that looking at the Irish solution to the Irish problem, that we will have, in the cases of rape. And then you go, okay, well, does the woman have to prove rape? In some jurisdictions, there actually has to be, it has to have been reported to the police, and it has to be actively being investigated before the woman can access an abortion. if she's saying it's rape. So I can see us going down that kind of,
that kind
you know,
which just again,
a real Irish way of doing it.
more
So did you
stressful.
tell the guards, and are the guards investigating it? And okay, now and you know, we'll have those kind of, and then they'll be saying incest, so they'll be looking at, you know, we'll have cases of rape, cases of incest.
They'll start listing all the
Yes,
possibilities.
but you'll have to
Just
prove
got a fine
the onus
print.
of
It's like
proof
side
will be on the
effects.
woman.
Fucking-
Yeah, and you know, and we'll still end up with if
So
the
it's
woman.
basically not trusting the woman again.
It's not trusting
I mean, it's
the
just
woman.
another
And
way of
this is
saying not
what
trusting the
this is my fear. This is what we'll end
So,
up with.
so then I suppose maybe what I was kind of getting at earlier on was, what do you think needs to be done within Irish society, culture, and psyche for us to? Because even if we, I mean, leaving aside that the Eighth Amendment is a
Yes.
legal and constitutional blocker. What about what do we need to do as a society to be actually able to just have that conversation with ourselves?
But we need to start having the conversation.
Yeah.
We need to start challenging the stigma. I think, you know, there's a group now, Doctors for Choice.
Right.
And there's a small enough group of doctors who are actually raising their head above the parapet and saying, I am pro-choice. We need more of that. We need the trade unions to start coming in and saying this trade union is pro-choice.
Yeah.
We need teachers for choice.
So-
we need nurses for choice.
So almost
Yeah.
almost like what the gay rights movement has done over the
Yeah,
last 40
remove
years.
the stigma,
Yeah,
remove
yeah.
and start
work
coming
with
out
little
as
groups and to
pro-choice.
say, look, I mean, you probably know somebody who's
Yeah.
been in this situation. We should
Yeah.
talk about it. We should discuss it. You know them. They weren't evil, or you know they weren't using it as a means of just.
But because the stigma is so strong still, that there's so few women who, I mean, everyone, I can, you know, there's been so many women have had abortions.
yeah.
Irish women who've had abortions, who've travelled for an abortion. We all know someone, we just don't know we know
We do,
someone.
yeah,
and
exactly.
it's going to be incredibly difficult for those first few women
Yeah.
to be the ones to put their hand up and say, yes, I will talk about my abortion.
Can we talk about, because I think, because this would be, this isn't something that I have reached a kind of conclusion of, but in my head, because I always try and categorize things, so in my head there's kind of, I think there's 3 strands of abortion kind of in my hand, right? So you mentioned fatal fetal abnormality.
Yes.
Now, so my understanding of fatal fetal abnormality is an issue with the development of the fetus that means it just cannot
It's
survive.
incompatible
It's just
with life.
incompatible. So incompatible with life. So
Incompatible
it will.
And the thing is about these are very often pregnancies that are really, really wanted.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
this is not
And
an
we've
unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah, and we've seen the women who were on the Late Late
Yes.
Show in the last kind of 2 years.
and
and
have
stuff like this.
the fetus remains delivered.
Yeah,
by,
and it's just
you know,
it's horrific.
by
It's
mail
barbaric.
through them. It's,
So let's. I mean, I think. I'm guessing, but I'm thinking the vast majority of public opinion would be you can have a
Yes.
you can because of faith you can have
Yes.
you can have an abortion up until the day before or the day after. It doesn't really matter.
I wouldn't go
think-
that far, but I think most people would be,
I think
yes,
most
they
people would
would
side with the
feel a
parents.
compassion there, yes.
So let's put that to one
because
side.
I suppose because the women are
They're
women.
guiltless.
Yeah,
They're
and
guilt.
this is
It wasn't their fault.
It wasn't
Yeah,
their fault.
fault.
It wasn't their fault.
And
They
Absolutely.
tried.
They tried. God
you know,
bless them.
that,
Didn't
and
they try?
maybe just God
just changed his mind. He got
challenging them a
distracted.
little bit.
He was watching an ISIS video and he went, "What?"
So,
you
but
know.
this is what we're going to end up. We're going to end up with categories of the
Exactly.
deserving women and
Exactly,
the undeserving
yeah,
women. And,
But I think this is how people process
yeah.
this. So
I
let's
think in cases of rape, most people
absolutely and incest and stuff.
and
like that,
incest,
absolutely.
most and a very young woman.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 15, 16 years of age
Yeah.
or younger. Most people would
Yeah.
say, "Okay, I'm not
I mean,
exactly
if you're comfortable
pro-choice,
with it,
but
I
I
understand
can."
the necessity
Yes.
of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of so let's say extenuating social and medical circumstances. Let's kind of say that, which covers fatal fetal abnormality, rape, incest, or a very young kind of woman. And let's just, for the sake of this argument, let's just put them together as blob one. Okay.
Okay.
Blob being the wrong word for this conversation. Sorry.
Thanks. Well
Right.
done.
Okay. Sorry about that. Right. Okay. So that's that group, and I think the vast majority of people are going to think that that's okay.
And research and polls have shown
Would show that.
yes,
There
You're
is
talking
support for that.
very
high
yes.
60s, low 70s
Yes,
to kind of
yes.
this type of stuff. So a big majority. Okay, so that's one thing. The second one then is my understanding now, and again, this is only something I learned recently, is that there's really nowadays, like most abortions are chemical based. Like the idea that I had of an abortion was the classic you know, Vera Drake,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
the thing,
yeah.
and the tarpaulin
Yeah,
over the
no.
legs, and the kind of the barbecue things and stuff like that. You know,
those days are gone.
And those days are gone. So that just doesn't happen anymore.
That's fascinating, because that is still the image that I
Exactly.
have.
And
But
this
that's
is-
the image that's been promoted.
Exactly.
Right.
That there is literally and the vacuum and all of this type of stuff. That, like, you know, you're hoovering a baby, a live baby.
Very, very late term abortions are still
Very late.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of abortions happen within 6 to 8 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like there isn't even a spinal column at that point. Okay, so let's code that's number 2, and then the third one then being this late stage abortion.
Yes.
So I think if we take the first group, the second group, which is early abortion, chemical based, a pill is administered, a chemical pill is administered, which causes the contents of the uterus to flush out, and then we have got late stage abortion.
Yes.
Would you agree that they are the most crude 3 categorizations we
Yeah,
could
you
arrive
could, I suppose you could put, people will try and put women who are maybe have mental health issues, and this is where the whole suicidal thing has come from as well.
Okay.
So most people might put them in
the first
A.
group. Okay, so an extenuating circumstance that is medical based or environmental or crime is
or
taking
the woman's
place.
health is in serious problem, and the deserving. This is the
the guilt free. It's like getting AIDS from like a blood transfusion. It's good AIDS. You didn't enjoy getting it, which is the bad AIDS. You don't want that type of AIDS, right?
Yes.
Exactly, right. So okay, so my feeling for this is that Group 1, vast majority of people would support it.
Most people would support legislation that would allow, but they will put restrictions in place because it's Ireland. But yes,
exactly. But the vast majority, it's kind of common sense. Like something's happening.
Yeah.
The second one I think is news to most people. I don't think they realise that abortions aren't surgical procedures.
Yes.
They're just like you can get a pill and that's pretty much what it is. And then the third one is really, I think, where the rubber hits the road, because I think the third one is you're literally, and I'll use kind of quite graphic language here, you're removing a live human being, and it looks like a human being, and
and this is where people
and so therefore it's much closer to murder than it is to something.
But I suppose that's the thinking that gives us these 24 weeks or people draw a line in the sand and say no, not
so this
after.
Is this is what I want, because this is where I don't know my own opinion about this. So this is where let's have a chat. So late and let's paint a worst case scenario here. Okay. Let's actually try and paint a worst case scenario and then discuss that. Okay. Which is late term abortion, no medical reason whatsoever. There you go. That's it. So no extenuating circumstances, no guilt-free nonsense or any of this type of stuff.
But there has to be a reason. I mean, I'm assuming the woman didn't, like we said earlier, she just didn't, it's not a case that she didn't get around to it. There is a reason why she is presenting herself.
I'll give you a terrible one here, but let's say, but I think it certainly has happened. Let's say that the couple has or is breaking up in the middle of the pregnancy, and we're getting to a point where the woman decides, I don't want to have this man's child anymore. I mean, for whatever reason.
Great idea.
But let's just.
But I suppose, well, I suppose what I'm saying is, why do we care? Why are we going to? I mean, are we actually going to? Is the woman going to have to present herself to the medical team and give them the saddest sob story that she can give them in order for them to put a rubber stamp on the piece of paper and say, yes, okay, your story is heart-rending for us. Is that the way we're going to have to handle this in Ireland?
Yes, because really what we're discussing here is we're discussing that the woman's own choice isn't a valid enough reason to
that there has to be
somebody else needs to go guarantor on this abortion.
Yes.
Have you got guarantor on this abortion?
Yes, who can you present to give evidence that
is better than this feeble-minded little woman who doesn't know what's going on?
There are so many scenarios that a woman can find herself in where she's choosing to have an abortion. Yeah. Are we going to attempt to legislate for each and every one of them?
Which is what when we were going through this, I'm kind of thinking, my goodness, and unfortunately, I could see this happening in Ireland, and I certainly. So this is, I mean, obviously, I'm not in a group that's trying to go for this, which is a question I was going to ask you about. As a strategy, it would seem to me maybe the better strategy, or maybe it could be a parallel course, would be maybe to try and bring some of these in, but if it were me, I'd be going hell for leather, trying to change the culture and hoping that by the time we got to 20 years down the road, the culture was changed enough to go, this is just a woman's
It has to happen before 20 years.
No,
we can't keep losing women at the rate that we're losing them.
No.
You know, what's happening to women in Ireland at the moment has to be seen to be as barbaric as it actually is.
Actually, no, that's something great. Because this is again was going to be my next question. I am kind of confused as to the current state of this whole 5 psychiatrists have to.
Yes.
Can you explain what the process is?
So it's as clear as mud, to be honest.
Right.
Even the guidelines do not give any clarification to doctors. And the whole point of these guidelines
was to give clarification.
So you do have to present to your GP as a woman, and your GP has to refer you. You have to go to your GP and say, I'm pregnant and I'm suicidal, and the GP makes a call and refers you. Now,
and you have to actually say I'm suicidal.
You really do have to.
That's the only out here. That's the only way. That's the only.
You can't just
chink of light in this legislation.
And you have to make the link between the pregnancy and the desire.
The pregnancy
to
is causing the suicidal
to end
thoughts.
your life.
So therefore, the abortion itself will cures the suicidal ideation.
Well,
I've heard it.
Yeah, and this is where you see, unfortunately, the pro-life people are coming in and saying, well, abortion has never been a cure for suicide, and I would.
You have to agree, it's not.
It's not, because a woman who's suicidal, I don't know if women become suicidal because they're pregnant. I think if a woman has mental health issues, being pregnant can definitely add to it and make it worse. But, I think more, it's not the pregnancy that's causing the suicidal thoughts or the depression. I think it's the lack of the loss of control, that she can't make her own decision.
Again, I mean, and it's this is kind of because I'm listening to you and I'm going, yeah, but this is the wrong argument to be having, because what the fuck has it got to do with us? But if
a woman had the right to access an abortion, she wouldn't be presenting as her GP to her GP as suicidal because she's pregnant. Yeah. So you're actually you're putting the woman in that place in the first place.
And do you imagine? And we've all let me, and I'm not trying to trivialize this, right? But we've all rung in sick to work, pretending to be sicker than we actually were, to basically get a day off, right? And you worry about this for a few minutes beforehand, and you might be a bit panicky, and you might get an hour and a half in the morning where you can enjoy the breakfast TV, but then you start thinking about, fuck man, there's all that work I've got to get done tomorrow, and I'm out, and there's a tremendous amount of guilt just from bunking off a day off work. Yeah. And we're assuming that a woman is just going to wake up and go, I couldn't be arsed with this pregnancy lark anymore. I'm going to knock down the doctor and fake being suicidal.
But then
meet me mates in the pub
then you've
later.
got to go in front of a panel, and I think it's 3 psychiatrists and an obstetrician. But
and now are they under cups and you have to guess which one is which?
But here's the thing. The psychiatrists, a large amount of psychiatrists have signed a pro-life statement saying that they will never, ever say a woman should have an abortion because she's suicidal. And those psychiatrists are still permitted to sit on these boards.
Oh, my goodness.
What woman is going to put herself through that 3-ring circus?
In order to get absolutely nowhere anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, as the Miss Y case has shown.
This is a complete put-up job. This is a circus designed to make it look like something
has
gone, but actually nothing.
I genuinely believe it's a process.
This is like a Soviet-era Russian solution to something.
It's a process that's been put in place to delay things as long as possible, and then at 24 weeks they can turn around and say, well, there's no point because you can't travel to England because you've reached I genuinely think they've made it as difficult as possible so that the 24-week happened with Miss Y. And Miss Y could have gone for an abortion the day she arrived in Ireland. Or Miss Y could have accessed an abortion the day she arrived in Ireland if it had been legal for her. Yeah. I mean, barbaric. There is no other word for it but barbaric. I mean, there is an Irish Times quite recently, I think it was the weekend, published the timeline of Miss Y from the day she arrived. And it's just, you really are pinching yourself. Is this actually really what's happening in Ireland today?
A lot of people working really hard to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And everyone working with, even people like the Irish Family Planning Association, who are working so hard at this and really want to help these women and are looking out for the women, and they have no guidelines, and there is always the danger that they will be taken to court because they've been pulled to court a few times, and they are working with no guidelines. They're working in a vacuum, and they're just people are just sitting back waiting for them to make a mistake so they can say, oh, there you go, they've put a woman's life in danger.
Yeah, I mean, what you've just described here is well, appalling. I had no idea that actually it was that bad, and I mean, like, again, and I'm looking at it from a constitution point of view. This is another bugbear I have with our constitution. A change was made to our constitution in '83. Wasn't a great change, and then '92 again, which is actually, I think, the basis for bringing this legislation. And there's nothing in for example, the constitution of California, the state of California. Once a referendum passes that makes a change for the constitution, the law is enacted overnight. At the very least, we should have something in our constitution that says if a change. So this goes across the board.
So we're not waiting 20 years to legislate
20 years, which in itself was, I had no idea, because I would have been 14, 15. So I was listening to the arguments at the time in '92 when they were being presented. Wasn't old enough to be able to vote on it. I didn't know a huge amount on it anyway. But to know that not only did we have to wait 20 years, but we had to be almost bullied into it by the European Court of Human Rights, saying you have for this change, you haven't implemented it. And of course, even I believe the courts have said the same thing. The onus was on the Oireachtas. They never bothered doing it. The change was in the constitution, and to make matters even worse, their implementation is just shite. It's just it's the nice way of putting it. It's cruel beyond belief. So let me ask then, because as I said, I'm not sure of the players in relation to almost the drama that is this question. Who are the people within Ireland? I think you mentioned the Irish Family Planning Association, but are there groups that are actually actively trying to change the culture and the mindset and the legislation?
There's a number of groups. There's the Abortion Rights Campaign, ARC, who are really, really active at the moment. There's ROSA, which is the Socialist Party subgroup, and they're very active at the moment. There is various groups throughout the country. There's Pro-Life Limerick, Pro-Life Galway. There are on the ground movements. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to, like I said earlier, get the unions involved, get Doctors for Choice, Lawyers for Choice. It's fantastic if you get a chance to listen to her on YouTube. A lady called Mairead Enright, and she is just fantastic. She's a lawyer for choice, and
if you send us a link, we'll
put
it on.
Almost certainly.
There was a conference very recently, about 3-4 weekends ago at this stage, about a month ago, and it was building a coalition to repeal the Eighth, and it brought together various groups from all over the country, and basically it was a day of how we're going to work together to do this. Mairead spoke at that. Claire Daly is very powerful on this at the moment. Daly, there's a lady called Anne Rossiter, who is very powerful and worth looking up as well. And she has a group. They are London based, mainly they're women living in London, called Speaking of Imelda. And you may have seen they presented the Knickers for Choice to Enda Kenny the other night. So there's they're raising awareness. They held protests at the St. Patrick's Day parade in London. They when the president was over, they were there with their suitcases all dressed in red, making noise. And you can see how it's kind of paid off now. They got and I think last I checked yesterday evening there was over 32,000 hits on that particular Knickers for Choice one. So you may walk around town and see ladies' undergarments hanging from various. I think Jim Larkin had one hanging from his hand there. So there are a definite movement on the ground. I think we're going to reach critical mass. I think because it's a point of critical mass.
Because again, if I make reference to the kind of same-sex marriage campaigns. Up until not that long ago, in fact, less than 5 years ago, only one of the political parties, main political parties, supported, and now I think all of them do, or all but one do, and obviously they're the last leg in this step. But I presume that one or more parties, I presume maybe Labour or I don't know about Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin's always a bit of an oddity, I find, because especially like they were in fact one of the earliest ones to support same-sex marriage, but they're deeply Catholic in many respects, and so
my understanding is that Sinn Féin support a lot. May support or maybe pro-choice this side of the border,
right?
But maybe pro-life on the other side of the border.
Right.
I would, there is those kind of oddities that kind of come up every now and then. Yeah, they definitely separate separation of church and state this side of the border.
Right, yeah.
We don't know about the other
they did
side.
the other side.
There tends to be those little oddities.
How far away do you think we are in relation to getting at least one of the parties to even bring it up at their national convention, if not actually be tentatively moving towards bringing it into policy? We support repealing the 8th.
I think Labour will probably have to be the ones to do it. I mean, as far as I know, Labour are a pro-choice party, and that's why it's so disappointing to see John Burton stand up in the Dáil and say, not in the lifetime of this government.
Right.
I think what happens, and I think
it'd be interesting to see now on the sorry.
I think we're both thinking of the same thing. The next election, because you're probably going to have a Fianna Fáil and someone else in coalition, not Labour, because the smaller party tends to get wiped out. So it'll take Labour maybe another election to build themselves up. As we're seeing, the Greens are only beginning to recover. I think we might have a Fianna Fáil, dare we say, Sinn Féin coalition. I don't know how that will play out, so it might not be. I can't see Fianna Fáil being the party to bring this forward, so it might be the election after that again. You know,
although both Fianna Fáil,
unless people make this an issue at the general election and say we are not going to vote for pro-life candidates. We ask them at the door when they come and knock the door, where do you stand on the right to choose, and make it very clear that people are not going to vote for TDs who aren't supporting the right to choose.
And that will require people to actually make that effort. And it will require people to make that effort, because that's the one. I mean, politicians don't have opinions.
No, they want votes. So if I think we let them know this is where your votes lie.
Exactly. In that respect, they're quite like scientists. It's just that the evidence they use is basically people's opinion.
That's not a comparison that's made very often.
But I'm kind of thinking that's actually
they want to get elected. So
There's, I think one of my my biggest concerns, as I said, I mean, because this is Freethought Friday, and one of the things that myself and Robert are really passionate about is to try and change the overall culture of well, in particular, obviously Ireland would like to see it across the world, where people are moving towards a free-thinking way of looking at questions, from simple questions to difficult ones like this. And unfortunately, because that isn't the case, then I fear that there's two big blockers to people doing that. First of all, it's the let's not talk about religion or politics at the table kind of attitude, and this is one of those topics.
And this is actually religion, politics, and sex.
All in
one
conversation. Neatly parsed.
Down with that sort of thing. So I think a lot of work needs to be done there. And then the second one is, unfortunately, it's just, I suppose to a certain extent it's true with things like same-sex marriage. It's just not on the top priority list, or even near the top priority list of many people. Especially because you were saying about talking to someone at the door. I most definitely would ask that question, because I would engage with somebody anyway in that way. But that's naturally me. I think the vast majority of people won't, and they're going to be thinking of their pocket. And this is unfortunate. I wish it wasn't the case for so many reasons, because there are so many more, way more important things, and the pocket question is so fleeting. You'll forget about it by the next or the budget after that. Whereas this and many other issues are important. But I'm wondering, how might we be? Well, I think one of the ways is for people like myself and Robert and groups like Atheist Ireland, Humanist Ireland, to try and change the culture, so that we're beginning to ask all questions, including the ones about, well, why the hell do we have these laws the way we have them?
Well, you could. I mean, it would be.
Is there anything else we can do?
I think it needs to be very much framed as a human rights issue. And I think it needs to be shown that Ireland has been taken to task by the UN. Ireland has signed up to various conventions, human rights conventions, and we are in breach of them.
Right.
And, you know, every time, the last, when they were in Geneva there only, what, two months ago?
2 months ago, yeah.
You know, Nigel Rodney, I think his name, said, in Ireland, women are vessels. They're being treated as vessels.
Yes,
and
I saw that. Yeah.
You know, he really, really came down heavy on them. And Irish people and the Irish government should be embarrassed about being.
But that didn't get the media coverage it should have.
It didn't get the media coverage it should have. But I think it really needs to start being framed. Ireland is quite proud of its human rights record, strangely enough.
And yes,
you know, and yet
we don't always.
You know, and I think we need
good reason to do
okay,
that.
well, now let me be a devil's advocate for this, okay? Because I think Ireland is very proud of its human rights record when it looks into doing the right thing in a human rights way, and then we can kind of go, Jesus, aren't we great? Aren't we fantastic? Didn't we give more money per head of capita to Live Aid back in 1985 than any
did
other
we
country?
stand up against apartheid?
Absolutely,
and it's
we didn't buy the oranges from Dunn's.
We didn't buy the oranges from Dunn's.
Right?
Aren't we brilliant?
No, we great. I don't think we have a particularly good track record of doing anything about when we found it. So I'm wondering, because one of the things, like you know, the difference between thinking something and doing something is actually doing something.
Yes.
Yeah, and like that's it. And history is changed by people who show up and all that type of stuff. If there was, and I'm interested in what you were saying, Ciarán, about you know, kind of. We've got to ask, and I'm sorry what you were saying, Ashling, we've got to ask the politicians about this on the doorstep. We've got to give, like, I like that kind of that Knickers Day. I like that idea. Like that strikes me as good. I remember, like, there was something really visceral and tangible about driving past the Archbishop's Palace when the report came out and all of the little shoes outside, and that was just like, it just made sense.
Yes.
It kind of anchored the thing.
Yeah.
If there was. Like and like maybe it's Knickers, maybe it's shopping.
There's the wheelie trolleys,
luggage
the
or something like that. Yeah. But something like that could be good. And then in terms of asking politicians on the doorstep, everyone's going to be more concerned about the water charges and where it hits them in the pocket.
Yeah.
But we could promote a Steve Jobs thing, which is and one more thing.
And one more thing, right? Yeah.
And you ask that one question.
One question. Yeah. That's
knowing that it isn't. Of course, it's the water charges. Of course, it's the bailout.
Yes.
Of course, these things are fundamental, and no one is suggesting that the abortion issue is more important than what's happening to your family right here, right now.
Until abortion happens to their family.
I'm trying to, we're trying to trick him into doing the right thing here.
But this is the thing.
Have some empathy, you pricks.
That will happen. You know, these are your neighbours. These are your wives and your daughters.
Your sisters. This is your potential mother, your grandmothers.
Yeah.
Like absolutely.
Yeah. You know, and I think we need to start putting human faces on these stories as well.
Definitely.
You know, and really challenging the stigma and supporting and putting resources in place to support women.
There's. I mean, that's absolutely correct. I mean, there is a lot. I mean, we talked about this deliberate misinformation at the top of this podcast.
I have a wonderful example of that.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
If I can find it now in my scribblings. Yeah, on the Bell Tower blog that I came across, they had in 1972, which is the year before Roe versus Wade.
Right.
Yeah. They said 39 women in the US died from unsafe illegal abortions. Okay. And they said maternal deaths from illegal abortions haven't been in their thousands since the 1930s, since before the advent of antibiotics. And this is a claim that they make on this webpage. Right. So I went to look at the World Health Organization to see how they compared. The World Health Organization, under the heading of unsafe abortion, 21.6 million experience an unsafe abortion worldwide each year. 47,000 women died from complications of unsafe abortion each year.
So 21.6 million, of which 47,000 will die.
Now,
and
the Bell Tower, of course, are looking at a first world country which has antibiotics, which has legal abortion, and they're saying women haven't died in their thousands since the 1930s because we have antibiotics. And they're saying so women aren't dying.
So we don't need abortion.
So we don't. We don't.
This is a nonsense solution to a problem that doesn't even exist.
Yes.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. They said 39 women in 1972 died from illegal abortion. The year Roe versus Wade was 1973. Right. And they're somehow presenting this as evidence, misinformation, that abortion is not that women don't need, women will die.
And this is right. So not only is it injurious, but this I imagine is also one of the things of abortion being used as contraception. It has that feel that type of statistic.
But I mean, the discrepancy between those two statements: 21.6 million women in the world will have complications from an unsafe abortion,
of which 40,
which is generally an illegal abortion,
will be fatal complications.
Yes,
but,
and they are in developing, by and large, in developing countries.
And here's and also I would imagine that those let's take those 21.6 million women, okay, and actually so 21.6 million women will have complications, 47,000 of them will die there and then. Yeah. But there will be a range of complications from very, very serious near fatal complications to quite trivial complications, if such a thing is to exist. So is the World Health Organization tracking people who maybe, let's say, get through 3 or 4 months and then drop dead from an infection later on? Like,
maybe not. So maybe the 47,000 is a conservative.
I would imagine that is. I would imagine they're not. I would imagine they're not being tagged in multiple questionnaires and checked up on and stuff like this. That these are clinic statistics gathered at the point by the medical professionals.
Well, they're not going to really even be that, because you're talking about illegal abortion. So I don't know.
So where they get
them? So it must be from
self-reporting.
Or reported after the fact, or
what's documented and recorded on their death certs.
So that figure is there's probably a lot more hidden behind. That data. Yeah.
Well, actually, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. But what we do know is that there's 21.6 million. Even if half of that is made up, that's still 10 million people.
Yes. Yeah. So
it's murder everyone in Ireland, fill it up again, murder everyone again, and half fill it and murder all of them. That's 10 million people.
That is
a year.
A year.
That's
10 million women.
10 million women.
Women
experiencing some form of complication. And we've had the actual figures. We've had the figures.
I trust the World Health Organization. I tend to think
I was just trying to be the balance for when the data's coming from, because obviously someone with a vested interest in disproving that figure would be, well, I need to know what's the progeny of this data. Where did that come from?
Yeah, and I'm sure if you contact the World Health Organization, I'm sure the links are there on their. No, they're not going to pull it out of thin air and just come up with a number. But and you talk about misinformation, and the pro-life movement will try and tell you, that abortion isn't safe, that women regret abortion, that women go on to, go into depression after having an abortion. And
you can say all the same for childbirth.
Exactly
the same for childbirth.
If you're coming home to Ireland after having an abortion, you're not able to tell anyone. You can't access any counselling. You're hiding this dirty little secret that if people in work found out, you'd be judged. It's not surprising women start to regret having an abortion. It's not the abortion.
It's the culture that disapproves of it. So
there's also the other piece of misinformation that they're fond about is they're very fond of putting a link together between breast cancer and abortion, and there is no statistical evidence. That's another thing that they're very, very fond of putting out as well.
So there is a lot of misinformation out there. And the other thing that I'd be concerned about, or that I know it almost seems obvious, but again, maybe because I also didn't think about this enough. Even though I know the labels pro-life and pro-choice, I guess I still had it in my head that the pro-choice group is a pro-abortion group, and I understand it's absolutely not. Pro-choice is about women having choice, and they'll either choose to do it or not.
Yes, and supporting the women.
No, it's not directed.
No.
So I think.
So pro-choice would also include contraception and sex education.
Yes.
So all of the information made available so that all of the options can be weighed out.
All the options.
And of course the choice to not go ahead and have an abortion. So I think well, if it were me, again, not that I'd be running this campaign, but I think if I were trying to get a national campaign together, I think that to me would be one, well, depending of course on what the stats show people's understanding of the issue is, but if their understanding is unfortunately as primitive or as inaccurate as mine was, then maybe I think that certainly it's a less difficult pill to swallow when you're saying, look, we're not saying we want abortions. No. We're saying abortion is terrible and it's sad, and in many cases we don't want it, but what we do want, or what we know is women are in a better position to make that choice than any group of doctors or any men or any legislative
or any lawyers, and and definitely any clergy,
and definitely most definitely any clergy.
Yeah.
And I think presenting, I mean, because you're right, it becomes a human rights
and it
campaign.
becomes a medical issue. It becomes just another reproductive medical issue.
That as with anybody else, if they had a medical issue, they would make a choice under the advice of doctors and whatever else.
Yeah.
Same thing happens here. So I certainly hope we could look at seeing that in the next 10 years. I don't know.
And I think what you've just outlined there, I think that's why I was so disappointed when I kind of expected a better standard of argument from the pro-life secular group. Yeah. And I thought maybe they would take some of that, that they'd say, okay, we're pro-life and we're secularists and humanists. Yeah. So while we're not happy about abortions, we would prefer if there wasn't a need for abortion. Yeah. So we're going to get in on the ground and we're going to do what we can to improve education, to improve access to contraception, to help women to make the wage gap smaller, to do what we can to help single mothers to manage, and really become active on the ground. And I kind of thought that's what I expected when I began to look into this, and I was so disappointed when I found out because to me that's what a humanist would do.
Absolutely,
they would step back and they'd say, okay, I don't agree with your choice, but I will do everything I can to make that choice as easy for you as possible, and to put so much and everything I can in place that that you maybe won't make the choice that I don't agree with because you have other options.
But that's not the path. That's at least your research has highlighted.
That raises, I mean, actually, I think the two of you just raised a really good point there, which you don't actually hear this, which is no one thinks abortion is great.
No.
But actually, I think that's because I think this can be characterized as I'm pro-abortion, I'm anti-abortion. No one thinks abortion is the least good answer to the worst fucking possible case scenario based out of necessity. That in a world where sex education was started from the age of 4 and it was completely discussed openly.
Consent needs to be included. Issues of consent. What is consent need to be included in sex education.
Absolutely. I mean, actually, sex education needs to be an adult discussion about sex education by adults to children, and then raising the level of the children's discourse about it. So all of those issues have to be kind of included in it. Then you've got to have contraception as freely available. I would have said as running water, but now we're water charges. So let's say contraception
as free as air until they find a way to
tax that one.
The Perrier will eventually come in a can, right?
But it's funny. I mean, when you say things like kind of condoms should be free. And everywhere. The pill should be free and everywhere. And the morning after pill should be free and everywhere.
Yes. The morning after pill, which is a really interesting one. The morning after pill, it costs about €10 for a pharmacist. Yeah. But the markup value, they can put whatever, they can charge whatever they want for it. They ethically, there is
an upper limit?
No, there is a thing where the pharmacist, if it goes against their ethics to dispense it, they can refuse.
They can opt out?
They can opt out, yeah.
A pharmacist can?
Yeah, can opt out of this whole thing.
I detest this. I hate money, right? I'm not allowed to opt out of that fucking monetary system.
No, pharmacists can actually choose to opt out of dispensing the morning after pill. And, there are stories out there
based on their
and usually the religious opinion.
Of course,
but I mean, if you're a woman who lives in a rural area and you go to the nearest town, and usually it's a Monday morning, a woman is trying to access the morning after pill, and she goes and her local pharmacist says, no. I don't do that. You drive into the next town, you're trying to get to work, you've someone to mind the kids. We need to stop being so stupid about this stuff.
Well, this is the punishment. I mean, and this is where you the whole thing's come full circle, because this is where you get back to the prurient, kind of judgmental based attitude towards sex, a natural instinct, and we've put laws in opposition to the natural instinct and just said, well, just don't do it is our answer. Like, don't do it isn't the fucking answer.
Isn't the answer.
No. It's not an answer.
We've been doing it for quite a while. I think as humans we're going to keep doing
it. Or we wouldn't be here to tell people not to do it.
The police have decided to disband themselves. They're taking out an ad break. They're just going to list out the list of things that they don't want us to do from now on. And he's going, don't do it. Murder. Don't do it.
Lads.
Exactly, says the cops.
At least they've covered more than the 10 Commandments have managed to cover. So.
Wow.
It's just the more you go into it, the crazier.
That's exactly.
Crazier
I really do feel we've tumbled down a crazy rabbit hole, and I can't believe that we're actually talking about Ireland. I mean, when I was growing up, I had this rosy-eyed view of what Ireland was, and as you get older, unfortunately, you begin to learn. No, we have lots of little problems, and I mean, we don't have massive, huge ones, thankfully, but we do still have a few large enough ones.
This is a massive, huge one because you know.
I suppose I was kind of more thinking we're not blowing each other up, but I suppose
it's violence against women, and you know that's maybe sounds a bit of an extreme statement to make, but it's government sanctioned violence against women.
Yeah, you're right.
And now you see when you say that, right? Like there's a little voice inside my head goes, it's not really, but it kind of go, no, but it actually is. It actually is. Like how
we acted in a violent way towards or Miss Y. We were
Savita and stuff as well.
And Savita, we were violent towards it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
The women who are are going to money lenders to try and get the money together for a ticket to England are trying to find someone to mind the kids and make an excuse because they don't want people to know where it is they're going and why they're going there. You know, they are anxious, they are stressed.
They're putting themselves in harm's way.
They're putting themselves
let alone the medical harm.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is an act of violence.
So how? Because I think because we're in Ireland, and this will presumably be listened to more so with people in Ireland. So based on our the statistics that I've heard are approximately 3,500 Irish women a year travel to England to
12 women a day. Yeah,
12 women a day.
Even more. But that doesn't include the women who are accessing the abortion pills online from places like Women on Web.
Right. Okay.
And you can actually buy abortion pills online, which is illegal in Ireland. And Customs and Excise have stopped the smuggling of abortion pills into Ireland and have seized them. So we don't know how many women are actually self-administering the abortion pill.
Wow, okay.
And we just hope that women are doing it in keeping with the guidelines of the pill, because it's not safe to take after a certain point. Yeah. But no one is there to help these women, and desperate people do desperate things.
Absolutely. And are there any statistics in terms of I'm trying to because I imagine in that situation, like if abortion was available, like contraception as well, if it was freely available, and I don't want to conflate the two of them because I despise that argument that somebody treats abortion like getting a fucking pizza. It's ridiculous, just dial it up.
Oh, thanks, Robert. Now I want pizza. Sorry.
Evil bastard. So are there? So I imagine that situation where abortions are hard to come by, but someone is determined that they're going to try and get one, and they have to save up the money and stuff. So this delays the amount of time from when they would have liked to have gotten one first of all to when they can actually access it.
But they still have the 24-week deadline that they're trying to meet, because that's the cut-off point in the UK.
Oh, wow.
And the Netherlands is another destination that women go to. So you're there's a ticking clock there. You can feel the stress building just thinking about it.
Yeah, just talking through it and understanding all of the pressures that are put on. It is. Can I? Sorry, Robert.
It's fine.
I was just going to ask. So I understand, given that Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales and England do enact many of their own local laws themselves, that Northern Ireland doesn't actually permit abortions, even though I think the rest of the UK does.
The rest of the UK does. Northern Ireland, as far as I know, it is in cases of rape and incest.
All right,
but not outside of that. Now I could be corrected on that one, but in my head, it's cases of rape.
Obviously,
and
incest. I'm not a.
Just the unenjoyable forms.
Again, we're back to. So we've obviously inherited some of that from colonial times.
Isn't it, it's amazing though. Like when you actually parse the language and you kind of that's actually what's driving that. That's well, you didn't enjoy the sex, so therefore you don't have to deal with the consequence. But if you enjoyed it
even a little bit,
you just smile.
But if you're bringing it back to the argument we discussed earlier, a human is a human is a human, and it's a human being, then however it happened, it shouldn't, irrespective. They'd have to follow through and say, I am absolutely pro-life and anti-abortion on all grounds. There is no reason, except unless the woman is going to die.
Yeah.
If it's absolutely necessary to save her life,
Yeah.
you would imagine that you would have to say no on all grounds.
Yeah, you would expect it. Yeah, so that
If you're going to be consistent, you're going to be
yeah,
rational
exactly.
and consistent in your arguments.
That
That's where it brings you.
underlines hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very, very
That's
good
very
point.
valid.
Yeah. Because I suppose I was kind of curious to see and I know, given especially the DUP have the overriding veto, even with
And
the
they've a lovely new health
system.
minister
Yes,
there.
I've seen that and some of their interesting statements. They're also they're the previous. Well, it was a good few back ministers who was also, I believe, a DUP member, who was the minister for, I think, Culture and Arts and Heritage, was the one who had who had insisted on some allusion to the creationist position in the new
that's right.
Yes.
Centre.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's always disturbing to see that any of that is hitting
And
hitting the shores of the island
Yes.
at all, you know.
Yeah.
But I suppose I was curious because had legislation been passed and you were able to have the same access to abortion in Northern Ireland as you could in the UK.
The rest of the UK.
And one would imagine that at the very least that would occur in Belfast. Now, not that would have been a solution, and it wouldn't. In fact, it might have almost been worse because it would make the problem even more hidden. But
That it would
I
just
was
be
wondering,
Yeah.
might it be at least, it might have been some sort of a reprieve for women who were doing the travelling. Maybe if it's Dublin to Belfast, it might be. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting
the problem. It's still exporting the issue.
As I said,
All you've done is you've really just cut down on travel time.
that's
but
we really have.
Yeah,
So
and possibly cut down on cost. So you probably have made it slightly more accessible.
Right.
Because
But
you've
of
lowered
course,
cost.
with no support
But
here.
you
But
still
no,
have
you're
to-
right. The two most important things is we still have that act of violence, unfortunately.
And this whole stigma.
And no support. And as you said, the stuff that actually causes the depression after the abortion, the cultural judgment and stigma that's brought to bear.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, like this, there's so much in it. As you said, the more and more you go into it, the more and more you go.
And it just keeps, the whole thing just keeps unraveling.
Yeah. And I do feel this is
sound.
just nothing to do with. When I say nothing to do with me, it's certainly it feels like it should be nothing to do except with the person who's actually having to make that choice.
Yeah,
It really
doesn't
does.
hurt to
really, for me, that's what it boils down to. It's the woman and her medical team, and the partner, if there is a partner there, and they sit down and they discuss it as a unit, and the rest of us just butt out.
Hearing the language that you use and describing it, because I mean, you don't have conversations like this. Like this is the one conversation that you don't have at dinner parties or nights out and stuff like this. Like it's like that's the whoa shit. No one bring up. You can talk about anything else. You don't talk about abortion and stuff like that. And it strikes me you could, if you swap out the word abortion and swap in the word marriage, then actually we're talking about arranged marriages. I mean, it's the same language. It is someone else dictating. A set of choices for another adult.
For another,
And again, you can have there's mitigating circumstances, and there can be this, and there can be that.
Well, we thought we knew what was best for
exactly.
her.
But we won't allow this type of arranged marriage. But obviously, if she's a dribbling imbecile, someone has to bloody well do it for her. And it's kind of deeply creepy.
It is really, really dark. It's a very, very dark place in our society.
I hadn't actually considered it from that point of view, but actually, it's very. It is quite, it's authoritarian. I don't know what the right word is, but it gives the...
It is deeply misogynistic.
Yeah,
it is deeply misogynistic.
It really doesn't
can
trust
you
women.
imagine?
It
Can
really
you
doesn't
imagine?
trust women.
No, but I mean,
Completely. It actually says that the last people to make to have a decision about women is women.
Is women.
Fucking stop women
all
making
emotional
their
and with hormones and stuff.
Jesus.
Sure, what would they know?
Oh, at least we know they won't be deciding on abortion when they're having their period there. You know what I mean?
It is, and it's so patronising and it's so misogynistic, and I just don't understand why we aren't actually just storming the walls at this point with it.
It's interesting that there would have been a I suppose there's a historical link, obviously. I mean, the laws certainly from the 1800s that we talked about earlier on, they would have all been written by aging old white men. In fact, old white very rich men, in fact. and there would have been very little else considered. And unfortunately, it seems like we've just carried that all the way through. But the language that is being used, maybe even by all sides, but certainly, obviously, by the government as well as maybe the groups that are against choice in this regard, obfuscates that misogyny. And and as Robert was saying earlier on, like the basis of this, it's almost like the arranged marriage and us making the decision for you. And I mean, because when you say it now, I mean, it's just like, why aren't we stoned? This is just absolutely, we should not be having this. But do you know what?
I don't think people are. I think the discussion. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I think the perspective of the discussion has up until now favoured the actual fetus.
Yeah.
Actually where.
Yes.
And so if that's your perspective,
yes,
then that changes everything. And then you can use language that then equates the woman with literally a delivery mechanism.
Yes, an incubator, and that is her function for those 9 months. And you know, that's the way it's been framed.
And that is kind of, I mean, like. We were talking earlier on about, you know, the rights automatically being switched on because now human, but as you said, with the commensurate and the rights of the woman, a woman automatically switched off for 9 months. And you're like, well, why? Yeah. Why should this person all of a sudden no longer be a person?
Miss Y had a court order taken out against her because she refused water and food, and they took a court order out to hydrate her. That's how much they switched off her rights. And the second time they went
force fed to make sure that she didn't
the delivery
because they were worried at that stage she hadn't taken food or fluids, and they were worried because
that's what a sane person does. Because somebody who's pretending to be suicidal, they give up water and food all the time.
But they weren't worried about her. They were worried about the effects that would have on the pregnancy. So they took a court order out to hydrate her. To protect the pregnancy.
Now, again, I think we have to be careful here, and this is in no way to kind of alleviate this, but this is the people on. Let us assume a lack of malice on the part of the people doing that.
Yeah,
that they're just following the rules as
they are making up the rules as they go along because there are no rules. Right. So because the Protection for Life Act was supposed to provide them with these guidelines, and it hasn't. So they are trying to figure this out as they go along. And, you know, delivery by cesarean at 24 weeks seemed, for some reason, to be the best option because she'd passed the 24-week mark and couldn't access abortion in the UK, so they couldn't export the problem. They knew they couldn't keep her. Well, the other option maybe was just to tie her to the bed and forcibly feed her and forcibly hydrate her until she went into labour naturally. That was probably one thing that they sat down and discussed. Another thing was, let's deliver by cesarean at 25, 26 weeks.
We'll just take it out of her.
Just take it out of her and let her go home. And then and you know what was really disappointing, really, but not disappointing, just really what hit so hard was the pro-life's response to that is, but there's a baby that's alive and there's a woman that's alive.
Everyone's happy.
What's the
Rainbows
problem?
and sunshine.
Our work here is done.
And the arrogance of them to name that baby Hope. They actually named that baby Hope.
I really don't know what to say to that. That is really quite disturbing. I do want to say, obviously, this show is about reason and evidence, and if people think that
really testing me this time, really testing my reason.
If there is a position that you feel that we have got wrong on the other side of this argument, we absolutely want to hear it.
They may think that the atheist pro-life woman was not the best person to present the secular pro-life view, and I hope that someone does take up this and come in and say, no, we got it wrong.
Well, we have said at the beginning of this, when we started this podcast, that we absolutely are unashamedly I was going to say pro-life, but we're pro-reason, most definitely. And we weren't going to take any non-reason junk on board. But we've always said, if evidence was presented, that we are open to changing our minds because the desire to know is greater than our desire to believe. Yeah. I think it would be very hard to imagine any kind of evidence I mean, that's why I too was curious as what you were going to say in relation to the secular point of view, but then noted that while perhaps secular in technically, not necessarily evidence based.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to hear if there is an evidence based case that just goes completely the opposite direction of this. But I'm finding it very hard now as I'm here. Now I know there's the emotional thing, and I'm trying not to allow that to drive me down. It must be this path.
I suppose if you're looking for evidence, I suppose you could go with biology on this one.
Right.
And yes, what we went back to was, you know, yes, it has human DNA. Yes, it has human parents. So, you know, if you want to be pushed that direction biologically, you can define it as a human being.
But
if you are taking your evidence from. But and then if human life must be protected at all costs.
Then that's how that drives you in that direction.
So if you are happy to accept that as evidence, then you can very happily go off in that direction. But you have to keep going on that train. You can't step off it. You've got to bring it right to the end point, which was what Christine said, and that abortion is murder and a woman should go to prison.
And the point you made in relation to, of course, then rape, I suppose, is not really, it's no excuse for abortion, because
abortion is murder and you have to protect it at all costs to the end, to the nth degree.
And of course, as always, I mean, myself and Robert have talked about this in relation to our economics and politics podcast. That if you're not looking at these things synergistically or holistically, then so if you are entirely focused on just the biological argument, then you're missing all of what you've just described to me here that I knew very little about in relation to the impact on the woman and everything else that surrounds that. And I cannot now understand how we could humanistically do that, make that choice to ignore all the other consequences, and I think it would be remiss of us to do so. So, but okay, that's I really don't know what to say.
It is kind of baffling.
It is. I didn't think it was quite. I want to say complex, but involved maybe, or that the tentacles just constantly just keep growing and spreading out of this. I mean, I knew that it wasn't just one question.
Yes.
I certainly knew that, but I did not realise all of the consequences that these that this touches. I mean, the whole right to travel thing was just one of these, and I thought, well, we'd kind of sort of dealt with that.
But even that, the fact that a woman could be stopped from travelling.
Yeah.
You know,
a passport carrying, tax paying adult, conscious, self-determined,
could be stopped by a I don't know, a police officer, and you look slightly bloated today. You wouldn't be going to 40. You wouldn't be heading to England for some.
That's a great adjective.
And no, I'm not letting you cross the border.
Yeah, which is just absolutely.
We actually decided. We actually had a referendum on the right to travel. Someone actually, as a people, we decided yes, other people are allowed to leave the country legally. We can't.
I mean, because I think we were in conflict with the Treaty of Rome. I think by that point anyway. So if we had voted no, that there were additional consequences. But I mean, as you said, and all of these things are almost just manufactured by the fact that we are not actually like. It does seem. I don't want to say obvious. I think maybe that's a little bit too flippant, but it almost seems like there's a very clear way of dealing with this, and then a very, very, at best, muddy, if not downright murky and disturbing way of dealing with it. And that's the path we've chosen.
Yes.
And the other path, certainly the clearer path, would seem to be we just give it is a choice, and it's not a choice for anyone else except for the person involved.
Well, I think actually when you say that, right, and I'm listening to you and I'm going, yeah, and what I'm thinking is that I think our society's attitude to it is that it is a personal problem that society has to deal with, as opposed to being a societal problem that a person ends up having to deal with. Right. We've actually got it kind of arse backwards.
Okay.
We look on abortion is there because people can't just fucking say no. They just can't control themselves. They're out being horny too much at the times. And fucking if they'd only stop rutting like rabbits, we wouldn't have to be dealing with lovely babies out of women and stuff. Fallen, whorish women.
Yes.
Like, it is kind
Yes.
of...
But go on to, there is a fantastic Facebook page called Shit Youth Defence and Others Still Say.
Yeah.
And every now and then it comes up on my news feed, and you know what? It's still there.
There's a cruelty
that
there's a cruelty in the system that is being set up that seems to be deliberate. And I don't mean, like, it's not deliberately cruel like a psychopath toying with somebody. It's cruel in terms of it is leaving it open to civil servants to decide. And they're not good at that. I mean, that's not the
that's not what they went into.
Civil service and problem solving aren't really what you kind of, you know.
Well, certainly not of this nature.
Like in
anyway.
Apollo 13, they didn't say, right, ring up the Irish Department of Education. I need some middle managers over there to get
there wouldn't be an old Opus Dei lad knocking around we could get some advice from, would there?
It is. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's and it is. I mean, I would also say politicians are also in that they're not problem solvers.
No, they're not.
You and I have talked about this
absolutely.
again. I think that's why, unfortunately, many parts of our political setup just don't work because problems that need to be solved and it's not evidence.
Because it's based on perspective.
Yeah. And so. And to treat this, well, I mean, to treat anything as serious as this, but very much to treat this as just another political question. Which
this is institutionalized discrimination against women. I mean,
yes,
it's like I actually hadn't I'd actually seen it before as just a lack of people getting to grips with it. That it was basically it was committee incompetence.
Yeah.
Was actually how I would describe it. Like, you know, well,
if we just sort it out, it'll
it's
be
a
fine.
pyramid of shit compromises, but at least we got a pyramid.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it's really not. This is willful.
Yes.
Well, certainly continuing it, I think, is willful. Yeah.
And it continues to be willful because for Leo Varadkar to turn around and say there's no appetite for a referendum on this.
Yeah.
That's
well, what they mean is there's no appetite on a referendum
for the politicians. He also said
but
politicians will be forced to take a stand on issues coming up to an election. Now, heavens forbid a politician should have to say what he actually or she actually
no,
stands
but as you said, they don't really have. Maybe, you know, that's completely unreasonable of us to
that they
demand
have to show
that
their cards before they get in rather than after. Yeah.
But and I think sorry, I had a train of thought there in relation to the politicians getting the fact that, I mean, as you said, when we don't look at this from the clearer choice of what could be done, the issues are so intricate and touch so many legs that even if there was a decent politician or even decent group of politicians that tried to wrap their heads around all of the issues, they probably just couldn't. It is actually far too complex. It's certainly far too complex to be looking at in a political kind of way, and yet that's the only mechanism, in fact,
it is.
We've given that we have.
Right, so I have a hypothetical.
Okay,
and this is me trying to clarify. I always try and kind of boil stuff down to as pure a kind of a, like, this is where it becomes binary and stuff or not.
Right.
So it strikes me that, okay, so if we agree that a good benchmark for health and well-being is longevity, i.e. how long you live on this planet. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we kind of go like, no one wants to die sooner than they're going to die. No one go, you can take me last day, I'll die the day beforehand. Everyone wants to live as long as kind of possible, as healthy as is humanly possible. Mm-hmm. We know that socioeconomics correlate very strongly with longevity. Mm-hmm. We know that for a fact, and that's the better food, better nutrition, better education, better healthcare, blah 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 blah. We know that higher fertility tends to correlate with lower socioeconomics. Yes. Okay, women not having control over their reproductive cycles tends to correlate with poverty.
Yes.
So, the people who are advocating the current system we have feel that a woman who wants to get an abortion but through the law is no longer allowed to get abortion will provide a better quality of life for that baby even though she wanted an abortion.
Yes. That's what it boils down to,
But they feel that that child's life, that child's life from the moment of fertilization and implantation is preferable given those circumstances, then should she have control over her reproductive cycle, be able to access an abortion in a case where contraception failed, or some of the environmental factors or crimes that we discussed may result in her becoming pregnant, and therefore having to deal with that and all of the economic consequences that come with it, which statistically would predict a shorter life with less,
with a lower quality
quality of life.
And there is research,
and they call themselves pro-life.
Yeah, but there is some research. You know economics? You might be able to. There is now. It's research that is very controversial.
Oh, this is the Freakonomics
This
one.
is the Freakonomics one, and they have tried to debunk it, and there are questions around it. But they looked at the lowering crime levels in America and couldn't figure out why the crime. And
in
they were looking at
cities.
in specific cities, and couldn't. Was it what the police were doing? It was it stricter sentences? What was going on? And what they figured out is they brought it right back to 1973, Roe versus Wade, and women who were socioeconomically disadvantaged had babies that they weren't having babies that they couldn't afford.
Either emotionally, physically, financially, temporally.
Yeah, and they weren't having to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to support these babies, and then never seeing these kids, and these kids wearing themselves and getting involved in crime and drugs, and they linked it.
And this is it, right? And I think this is really what it comes down to, right? Because on one case you've got the argument that you've just put forward, which is evidence based, which is based on observation. Now correlation does not equal causation, so there may be other factors, but there is definitely a correlation. There is a statistical correlation that says that the cities that were pro-abortion, that made it more easily available, had a corresponding drop in crime. Right? As abortion rates went up. Abortion rates went up, and 10 years later there was a drop in crime because these children who would have been born and who possibly would have been delinquent because the mother would have had to have been out, frequently fallen out there, the mother had to have been out working to kind of earn food and stuff, and as you say, raise themselves, raised by older male, kind of non-parental blah blah blah, gang culture, we get the whole thing. Now that's an adult discussion, that's an adult problem, that's a real world adult problem, as opposed to Sky Fairy says it's a bad idea.
And then Sky Fairy says, and I'm really getting pissed off with this that the woman is immoral. And I don't think anybody really. Do you think people still buy that? They
really
think a woman who has an abortion is making an immoral choice, and this. You know, immoral is a weighty, heavy word.
It is. There's no coming back from that. Like, it's a bit like, because that's quite close to fallen woman and shamed woman.
Shamed woman and immoral. Yeah. But I mean, to make that judgment on anyone is a heavy judgment.
It is an immoral act without redeeming qualities. Fuck, I know that's a big thing to say about somebody else whose life you don't know.
It is, isn't it?
That really is.
Most definitely. Well, I think, I mean, I've certainly learned a huge amount in relation to this question. Just even tonight, I had a look at some of the stuff that you had you sent to myself and Robert, all of which we'll put in our descriptions. But I mean, nothing compared to. I mean, even the things that you sent weren't necessarily directly related to Ireland. So just learning an awful lot about how Ireland treats this is. And
it's a lot worse than I thought.
It is. It's
a lot worse than I thought.
Yeah, I didn't think it was quite as bad. I think some of that is willful ignorance on my part. I didn't really want to know.
But also we have been, we have been spoon-fed the idea that pro-choice is a minority. And I believed it for a very long time that pro-life was the majority group in Ireland.
Oh, I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought
but the pro-life have run a really smart campaign convincing us that they're the majority and they are what most people think.
Climate science deniers.
I would have thought that was actually the case, and that's not the case.
That's not the case.
The
latest polls. I can put the links. I'll send the links.
Please do.
The latest polls are showing that the majority, and particularly young people in Ireland now, are pro-choice. Anyway, but like you said, anyone under the age of 49 has never had a say on this anyway, so we really don't know.
So that's completely that's new to me, in that I had absolutely fallen hook, line, sinker for the assumption, and a pure assumption. I have not looked up the
it's pure, it's spin.
That the vast majority of people would have been, or that
There is I don't
a
know
majority.
any majority, but I don't know vast, but there is a majority.
But even that there would be, but because you said that the pro-choice would be a minority, I had in my head before you said that, it's probably at the 12%, maybe at the 20% now, but I certainly didn't
Which is also interesting that if we bring it back to where we started, to the whole discussion about the religion and pro-choice. I mean, what the last census, 82% of people in Ireland are Catholic.
Yeah.
And if they're saying a small majority now, it's not a vast, but a small majority are now pro-choice. There are obviously Catholics who are pro-choice.
Absolutely.
So, this whole thing about, it's, when reality comes and bumps into your faith-based beliefs, something's got to give. And we've seen it the same with contraception, we've seen it the same with same-sex marriage and marriage equality. These things come and bump into reality.
I had a conversation with someone specifically regarding the census, and they didn't know this, and I was talking to them about, because there was the issue with the wording of the specific religious question the last time,
and it's not going to change on the next census.
Exactly. So if you're an atheist or non-believer, you put down none. You don't put down other, and that's considered a spoiled.
And other is other religion.
That would be like if you're a Jain or a Bahathist or whatever.
You will be counted as a religion.
A Jedi. You kind of put that one down, but none is for non-believers.
Yeah.
And I know I was talking to people who I worked with at the time, and one of the people said, see, I don't go to mass and I don't go to church, and I don't really follow the church, but I don't consider myself a non-believer. I believe in something. Right?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of deist
positions
out there. Yeah.
And the issue that I was trying to explain to them was, I said, well, the danger with that is, it says that the Catholic Church gets that census data, and it says, well, 82%. So therefore, we have a mandate to talk to government because 82% follow our doctrine. So therefore, the Catholic Church gets access to the high-level political decision makers more so than it is. So it's very, very important that everybody understands that when you sign that religious thing, you're actually, it's like voting for a religion.
For the church. You were giving them your vote.
You were giving them your vote, and that's it. Therefore, you're giving them access to act on your behalf. And that's we're going to bang on about this a lot.
That would actually be an interesting podcast to do for the future, coming up to the next census.
I think we should. I think that's because I know it's also been an issue in relation to. And it's also been used as an excuse by the government, the current government, in relation to schooling and fully creating I mean, it's again another book. Bear with me. I don't have kids, but if we have a publicly funded school system, if we have a publicly funded system, it should be a public system and not a publicly funded private system, which is essentially what it is at the moment.
But as the UN pointed out to Ireland when they were there, the essence of human rights law is that the majority do not get to dictate and remove the rights of the minority.
So even if that were the case,
if it's the case, it still falls flat.
But unfortunately,
and Francis Fitzgerald came back and said, yes, we take that on board. And then John Merton stood up in the Dáil a few weeks later and restated it, but that's Ireland for you.
But absolutely.
Again, saying it and doing it, not the same thing.
No.
I'm doing the saying though. I'm standing up when I'm saying. Is that not the same as doing it? No.
So we'll definitely. I think we should have a podcast on that. I think we should have a podcast on that. Do you have any more questions before maybe we wrap it up?
No, I mean, I think we're going to have to come back to this one again. I think this is going to be. When are people expecting this referendum?
Claire Daly's going to table a motion in the Dáil in January or February.
Okay.
It'll probably be knocked down. The government seem pretty adamant it's not going to happen in their lifetime. But I still think Claire Daly's motion and what she made a very empowering speech at the March for Choice there a few weeks back, and she said, I will bring this motion forward. Will you be there for me when I do it? And I think that's the next step. That she brings this and people turn up and say, this is what we want. And we just need to be seen to be vocal and visual on this and just start taking to the streets when we have to.
I do you know what I mean, from discussing this with you again, I certainly feel that it's possible to see this certainly within our lifetimes, I hope, and maybe a good deal sooner. Whereas before we discussed it, I had you just asked me, took a straw poll at the beginning, I would have said, maybe we should, and it would be great to see it, but probably not. But I mean, actually, I think this is very real. I think hopefully this could happen quite fast.
History is a way of doing. I mean, things like apartheid fell fairly quick.
Yeah,
once it started falling, it fell fast. Berlin Wall, once it started falling, it fell fast.
Again, I apologise for constantly harping on about this, but it's just because I'm aware of it and I read all of it. I was reading an article only this morning in relation to same-sex marriage in the United States, and to have seen because what the article was that it had just now, as a result of the last SCOTUS ruling or decision not to rule, that it has now just reached over the 50% and 51% now support it because, it's available to more than the majority of the Americans, which is it's done. And given that up until a few years ago, it wasn't even legal in California. because of
it's a domino, isn't it? You just
which they knew, and so that certainly does give me hope that my brother, who is a very wise man, and unfortunately I agree that he's right, that real change tends to be slow, but in a number of these cases, while it's slow because the roots of it were planted a long time ago, when we are getting to that last leg, it does, as you said, the dominoes seem to hit very, very fast. So hopefully it will happen before we see more tragedies. Yes,
and I'm hoping that the catalyst for change is not going to be another tragedy, because it's the catalyst for change. So often in Ireland is tragedy.
I remember. Sorry, because just as you mentioned the tragedies that we've had, and I think of Savita Halapanar. I up until recently I was working in a multinational, and a very good friend, a colleague of mine, he is Indian. And the Indian community was obviously very, very well outraged by what happened, and obviously very much devastated. I mean, almost that devastation is important because it wasn't we hate this and we hate this being in Ireland. They were devastated that such a thing could happen at all. And my friend kept asking, like, how can this happen in a modern country? And I mean, there was most definitely a very strong sense of embarrassment from I mean, that's nothing compared to the poor woman who's actually died. But I had this I couldn't explain to him, because I am very proud. I was very proud. I kind of been a little bit involved in politics, and I was happy to tell him about our system and about the flaws in it and all of that. But just very proud that we do have a system and more or less works, or kind of works, but then to come across these anachronisms and just and in such a horrific way, I just was beyond embarrassment, and I just could not explain it. And he didn't look at me with shame, but almost with pity.
Well, I think a lot of people were surprised, but I mean, I remember at the time a lot of people I think were surprised at what happened with Savita. It's like what, that can happen? That can actually happen in a hospital? Shit like this can happen? Because it did seem to be like medicine, science. Oh, superstition! Here we go, superstition! Sorry, you're dead. Like that literally seemed to be what happened. Medicine and science doing their thing. They come to this line in the rule book, and it's like, sorry, the witch doctors have to take over here, and they're now in control of stuff. And
Savita's case was not an isolated case. I mean, it was because Savita's case ended in the worst way possible. There are women came forward after that and said they were in a similar position, and they barely made it through.
I mean, this is.
So this is this is healthcare. This is affecting
We're back to the standard, or what's our definition of good health? And I mean, this is in this. This is just not in.
And again, it brings you back to it's an act of violence against women.
Yes, of course.
If you deny someone healthcare,
it's the withholding of care. It is the deliberate withholding of care when it is required.
True.
It's not giving medicine when medicine is required. It's holding back paracetamol from a sick child. It's not giving someone with a broken leg a cast or getting them in. It's just like, no, sorry, you're on your own.
But we have it. But we're not going to give it to you.
You just don't
can't get it
because we think you deserve what happened to you.
It is. It very much is an act of violence against women. Very much so. Well, listen, Ashling, I think we'll probably leave it there if that's okay, or else, because I think we're reaching a new record.
It was about 8.5 weeks.
So we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. Thank you so much for coming and talking and educating us about it.
Very
and we certainly, as always, we want to hear your opinions. We want to hear counter opinions. evidence-based counter opinions. If we've got anything wrong, let us know. We'll put that on our Feel Better blog post.
And I think, considering that this is such a contentious issue, we'll also make this offer as well, because this is our place, right? So what we'll say is, we will come to your place. If you have an opposing thing, we'll come to your place and do a podcast, but it'll want to be somewhere public where you can't turn us into cult members and kill us, because
Absolutely. So I think we decided to play. I like that we've started or that we have had a piece of music at the end of each of our podcasts. So we were having a very quick discussion at the beginning of this. We have decided actually to put an 80s classic. So if for no other reason, you're going to just enjoy this, but it has obviously some relevance to our conversation tonight. This is Madonna and Papa Don't Preach.